Good morning. Welcome to Introduction to Learning Progressions. This session leans heavily on chapters 6 and 8 of the Reading Pathways book. You will need this Reading Pathways book and a unit book of some kind. It doesn't matter, whatever unit you're working in currently, to be successful in this session. So what are learning progressions? The learning progressions are a description of the skills and how those skills grow across time. And I made a little chart so you can see all the skills that are addressed in the learning progressions, narrative and informational. And you can see there's a lot of overlap. So when we're learning progressions or when you're deciding what to teach, you have some common language. They're not exactly the same in informational and narrative, of course. That wouldn't make sense, but they are similar. So that is a list of all the skills that are covered in the progressions. In your Reading Pathways book, at the back, starting on page 174, you have all the progressions. The progressions cover grades 2 through 6. They're meant to be used with grades 3 through 5, although I can see 2nd grade and 6th grade leaning on those. I've linked in a copy of these progressions for you if you would like a digital copy. So why these skills? Why are these the progressions? They're focused on the skills that are the most high leverage for young readers. If readers develop these thinking skills and they are moving up reading levels at the same time, they'll do very well. There is a lot of reading work that's quite interesting, but that only pays off in certain kinds of text. For example, studying archetypes and fairy tales. That's interesting work, but these progressions focus on the big work that will pay off in many different kinds of text that's transferable to all types of text. So, why do I care about these progressions as a teacher? How do these progressions help me as a teacher? To teach well, it really helps to have a sense of the pathways along which readers seem to develop. The progressions will help you feel a lot more knowledgeable about the work readers do in fiction and nonfiction across grade levels. Really, I think that these progressions would be your best friend because you know exactly what kids need to know at a certain level and how to push them forward to the next level. They can act as your cue cards, and they allow you to give your students very specific, pointed tips about the next steps they can take. So when I'm conferring with students, or I'm having a small group, these progressions can help me know exactly what my teaching point's going to be. The progressions help you differentiate your work. So I know that a student, I can identify where each student lands on the progression, and then I can make plans to teach each of those students where they need to be taught. So how do these progressions help students? The progressions are written in the first person. When we use the word I, it increases accountability. It's not someone or a reader who needs to have done this work. The question is, did I do it? So these are written for students to read. Handing the progressions over to a kid after you have front-loaded them and modeled how to use them, not just handing them over cold, and saying, this is a way for you to look at your work and see how you are doing and know what you need to do to get better. can be very, very powerful. Students are able to learn about their progress and from their progress using these progressions. So by using the progressions, students in a reading workshop can check to see how far they've come along the pathways toward meeting certain goals. And if they fall short, the progressions can guide them in the right direction toward meeting that goal. So we're going to look at some student work, but as we look at this student work, we're going to keep these questions in mind. What is the work that this reader is attempting to do? What's a hugely important way I can help the reader progress along the skill trajectory of that work? What is the work that this reader is almost doing? So I'm going to kind of keep those three questions in mind as I think about this student. So this is an actual script of a conference with a student. Tell me about your reading is the question the teacher asked as she sat down to confer with the student. And here is a script of that conference. And I'd like you to read to the line just quickly, like 30 seconds. Let's just read to the line and get a feel for this kid and what work he's doing. Remember keeping those questions in our mind. Ready to come back? Okay. Okay. Now that we've looked over this script, what I would like you to do is with someone near you, I'd like you to read the analyzing parts of a text in relation to whole strand of the informational progression. And I've got it linked there for you. And I would like you and a partner or you and a group of a team think about where does this student currently fall on the progression and what should be the next teaching point to move this student forward on the progression. So we're going to take 5 minutes and I'd like you to look at that progression, determine where, based on this conference, where does this student fall and what would be some next steps for this student. And please, when you have some thoughts, please type those into the chat box and share with us. Okay, if we could gather back, what did you notice about this student? They're ready to start integrating, I believe, their information from the text box and information from the text. And there's a lot of growing that could go on there if you look at those progressions. So you can see how the progressions can help you determine what you need to teach a kid next. And what I liked about this sample is it doesn't have to be a product that you use the progressions with. It can be a conversation, the conversation you have with a kid during a conference. That's why you'll probably want a copy of these progressions with you as you travel around your classroom conferring with kids, or as you're working at the back table with a small group. You probably want to take those progressions with you everywhere. Okay, so let's kind of debrief that a little bit. So based on your self-questioning, what is the work that this reader is attempting to do? What's a hugely important way I can help the reader progress along the skill trajectory of that work? What is the work that this reader is almost doing? Thinking about those questions and then using the progressions, you had a hunch that this student is attempting to relate part of the text box, to the main article. And so to help this student, it's important to know what this part to whole analytical reading looks like when it's done at a fairly low level, and what it looks like when it's done at a more advanced level. And this is where the learning progression comes in, and this is how you know where to move your students. So we're going to look at another scenario in our Pathways book. So if you would turn to page 119, and starting with the second paragraph on page 119 and reading through page 120, and then this just little bit of sentence here at the top of 121. I'd like you to read that section, and when you're finished reading, talk with someone near you about what did this teacher do to guide her students forward in the progression. Okay? Go ahead and get started on that. Okay, if we could gather back, finish up your last little bit of reading. I love this little vignette and how this teacher had her whole class involved in using that progression and self-assessing their work. We're going to do some more reading now. Starting with the last section on page 121, it says, demonstrate by using the progression to create your own writing and reading. And reading towards the first few sentences through on page 125, there's a few sentences up there. I would like you to read through those pages and ask yourself the same question. What did this teacher do to guide her students forward in the progression? When you finish reading, if you could talk to the people around you about that, and then we'll resume once we've all finished reading. Okay, let's gather back. I loved the example on page 122 of the different writing at each level. That would be great mentor text for your kids. So thinking about these two scenarios we've read about, and the conference that we read about, talk to the people near you about how using the progression might look in your classroom. Right now, what idea, after reading these three scenarios, what do you think you could do in your classroom right now to use the progressions? What ideas do you have? And I'd love for you to share those in the chat box. We'll take about 2 minutes for discussion. And if you could put some of your ideas in the chat box to share with everyone else, that would be great. Okay, if we could come back. There might be a little lag time on those chat entries. So I'm hoping you're getting an idea in your head about how progressions might go in your classroom and how helpful they can be to you as a teacher as you look at those skill trajectories. So the question is, how could I possibly learn all these progressions? When you look at this book, this looks overwhelming to you. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of information. And I put the picture of the hare and the tortoise on here because slow and steady wins the race. No one is going to expect you to know all these progressions immediately. I don't think I personally, at the age I am now, I don't think I could ever memorize all of them. It will take some time and some practice before you and your colleagues are able to listen to a child talk about a text, read writing about reading, and be able to place the work that youngster is doing, is attempting to doing in a larger map that charts the pathways to their proficiency in reading. So it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take years of practice using these progressions. So, a good way to get started is determine the progressions that are being used in a particular session or unit. In many of your unit books, in the orientation to the unit, there's like, this is 3rd grade unit 1. It says right here, supporting skill progressions. And it has information about the progressions that will be used in this unit. Okay? In the getting ready section, it usually will tell you what progressions are going to be used or that kids should use in this lesson. So take that one session, pull out the progression for that session, and read over it. So begin looking at each grade level in the strand and asking yourself, what is new at this level? So, for example, this is just a really, if you click on that link there, this is just a really, this is from my book. This is notes I've made in my book. And what I did was, I read the 3rd grade progression. I made some notes down here about what I thought the gist of that was. And then I looked at the 4th grade and I thought, okay, what is new learning that happens here? What is the trajectory from here to here? And then I read this and just did some notes to myself about what the gist is of the new learning that has to happen. That's one way to try to get a handle on these progressions. And then don't try to memorize. Just, like we said, preview the progression that you're using in that session and think about the pathway. And then take a copy of your progressions everywhere you go. That should be part of your conferring toolbox or your small group, that they're always there. So, and it wouldn't be, if I'm conferring with a student and I'm listening to them and I start having a hunch about the work they're trying to do, it would be perfectly appropriate to start thumbing through here in front of a kid and saying, okay, oh, okay, this is where I think you are. And looking at how you can grow their learning. So, what I would like you to do now in the 10 minutes that we have left is, I asked you to bring the current unit book that you are working on. I would like you to look at an upcoming session that you're going to teach and find the progression that is called out in that session. Then you're going to read the level below your grade level. Then you're going to read your grade level and annotate what is new learning from the previous level. And then you're going to read above that grade level and annotate what is new learning students will encounter at this level. So let's spend the next 10 minutes on this. You should have your unit book. I've linked in electronic copies of the progressions if you want to use it that way. And you should have your pathways. And again, the progressions start on page 173. Okay, so I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes and we'll check back in just a few minutes. Any ahas or insightful things you notice, go ahead and put in the chat box. Okay, if we can just come back and debrief a little bit before you go on your way. I hope that you have found that these learning progressions can really be like your best friend when you're thinking about what you need to teach students. I think there's great comfort to be taken in the fact that you have a trajectory of learning that you can refer to when you are thinking about what you need to teach students or how you need to push students forward. So thank you for tuning into this session. I hope it was beneficial to you. If you have any questions or need any help or want me to come out to PLCs or faculty meetings, anything like that, just let me know. If you just want to call and chat about something that this is making you think about, please feel free to do that. I can be available to you through email, phone, or school visits. And then one last thing before we go, I want to give a plug for the Innovation Institute that will be coming up June 6th and 7th. You might want to read the information on this slide and start thinking about if that's something you'd like to do this summer. Thank you. Have a great day.